Hello everybody, and you've probably all noticed that the first upload of this video was deleted by myself because I'd apparently gone into something that was data mined by somebody. It was released onto Reddit, and then I talked about it, but since I'm a part of the super test, I can't talk about it because of the non-disclosure agreement. So this leads to a very interesting conundrum for me, as I'm both bound by an NDA where I can't talk about things even if they have been data mined and whatnot. So I'm sort of faced with a choice right now. I can either resign from Supertest and then therefore have no input on a Supertester front again on any future changes, or I maintain my position in Supertest but never talk about anything that is data mined or anything like that. And right now I'm having troubles. Let's just say I'm having trouble deciding what I want to do. So either I keep working sort of behind the scenes and try to make things better before the live patch comes, or I leave that and then have the freedom to discuss potential future changes with all of you. I put a straw poll in the video description, so let me know what you think. And now back to the original sale and chat episode, so enjoy. Today's episode is pretty much going to be dedicated to talking about patch 5.3, my thoughts on it, my feelings about them, and any other information that I think would be important for you to know. So of course, the major change that came with patch 5.3 was the complete sort of change to a bunch of stuff in terms of captain skills. There's now more selection, and there has been sort of a rearrangement of certain skills moving up to certain other tiers. And overall, I think the skill tree in its current form is definitely an improvement over the skill tree we had before. There's also that sort of additional thing that I mentioned earlier, which is more selection, which is a good thing because that gives ships more variability, and you can build ships based on your playstyle. Of course, if you want more details on the individual skills as well as recommended builds, then do check out my most recent Captain's Academy episode on 5.3 skills. However, the thing I have to talk about in more detail in this particular sale and chat episode is the impact of the captain skills on a particular ship in the game, which is the Mogami. Now, I am aware that of course other ships like the Cleveland, the Omaha, the Murmansk have been impacted by these changes to captain skills, but I do think that those were actually necessary changes because it really is kind of ridiculous that a tier 5 light cruiser had more range than most heavy cruisers in the game. So, those changes I am okay with. The Mogami is where I do want to talk about it because at tier 8, having the range that the Mogami has now is a little bit iffy. It does make the ship a little bit more challenging to play, and it does make life a little bit more difficult. Still, I do think that it was a necessary change. The original Mogami with the 155 setup with all those skills made the Mogami incredibly strong, and I think you can arguably say that that particular setup of the Mogami is one of the strongest tier 8 cruisers in the game. So I'm okay with that. However, the current setup of the Mogami to use the 203s and everything, I feel like does need a little bit more range. So I've actually said this to the developer and I said, look, I think the Mogami needs just a touch more range. 16.5, maybe bordering 17 kilometer range would be good. But of course, there's an issue with trying to give it more range because right now, range is tied to the hull and the FCS. Now, if you increase the range from any of those two modules, it will grant the 155s on the Mogami that range bonus again, which would make the Mogami return to its old role as the long-range flamethrower. And I think that's something that Wargaming is trying to avoid with the Mogami. So, at least for the foreseeable future, the 203mm guns on the Mogami are going to stay the way they are right now. They are still playable. The 203s on the Mogami are definitely playable guns. They're not like, oh, these things are completely useless. I think with the 203s, if you just go with the stealth spec on the captains, the 203 Mogami should still do pretty well. Now, somebody's gonna be bound to point out here, but after they nerfed the captain skills and they changed them or whatever, and the Mogami got nerfed hard, The Kutuzov got buffed. The Kutuzov got all the benefits of BFT, AFT, and Expert Marksman. What's going on there? Now, the Kutuzov is a premium, which means that people actually spent real money on those ships. And from what I've heard from, the interviews, I think with Wargaming CEO that Jingles posted a while back, Wargaming wants to expressly avoid messing around with premiums because the paying customer paid for the ship and they don't want to just say, hey, let's change your ship. There it is. Now it's no longer the same ship, because that's going to make the paying customer angry and not buy things again from your company. And I think that has more to do with a business decision than anything else. And so it's not like a Russian bias there. I think that is more to do with, let's not piss off our paying customers. So, we'll have to see how they deal with the ship in the future if it does vastly outperform. Although I have a feeling that if it becomes, this incredibly, insanely strong ship that really beats everything else, then, they will eventually rebalance it as well. At least that's how balancing should work, right? Anyways, the other change that happened in 5.3 was to carriers. And in particular, the US carriers at the higher tiers got changed quite a bit. So lower tiers, those carriers I think are okay right now. They sit in a pretty comfortable spot. They seem to be able to do their role and their job decently well. But on the US side, tier 8, 9, and 10 got changed quite a lot. The Lexington on its stock configuration went from a 211 down to a 111. So you lost a fighter squadron there. The Essex and the Midway, their strike packages went from a 122, where you had 2 torpedo bomber squadrons, down to a 113. So you lost a torpedo bomber, gained a dive bomber. Initially, when these changes first came out, I was pretty much against them because at the time they didn't compensate the US CVs with anything. They just took away the torpedo bomber squadron. They took away the fighter squadron, which, as a US CV player, you're sitting there going, what do you expect me to do now? Well, Wargaming actually gave the US dive bombers a pretty substantial buff. They gave them 1,000-pound bombs on their dive bombers. Well, with the changes to that now, the US CVs aren't actually as bad. The 1,000-pound bombs do a lot of damage. So with the Lexington, which initially you would play the 211, you can now play a 202, and those 2 dive bomber squadrons can still do quite substantial amounts of damage. The Essex and the Midway, those 3 dive bomber squadrons, absolutely deadly if you actually hit things that are allowing you to get in there and get clean dive bombing hits. So for example, a destroyer. You could devastate destroyers now in a way that you could never do before. So it's okay. It's actually playable. I mean, I initially was against it because the dive bombers stayed with their 500-pound bombs. So, with 1,000-pound bombs, quite a bit better. My problem, of course, is the fact that there's too much RNG. And I've said this, and I said, look, I think it's just so much RNG that's going on. I had a battle the other day where I had a cruiser within my drop circle, perfectly in the middle, and I was under defensive AA fire. Now, with the US dive bombers, that's actually not too much of an effect because of the fact that the bombers are more stable. I went in there with 21 Midway dive bombers, landed 0 hits. So I was a little bit peeved off by that. So I just kind of said, hey, look, what the heck is going on here? It's too much RNG. The developer that I talked to acknowledges this and says, yeah, he doesn't like the RNG either, and he also wants it to be more just rewarding for skill and getting the target drop right and the target hit area right, and you actually getting your planes through and actually landing your hits. So I think that they are aware of something like this, so they are going to eventually figure it out, how to make it better, how to maybe change it a little bit. We'll have to see. But and as you can tell right there on that little clip that I just showed you, I did really good damage with just dive bombers. So, that plus fire is pretty lethal combination. Anyways, back to the RNG topic. So, they are aware of it, and I think it is something that they're going to look into more and more to see if there's a way to make it a little bit better, maybe to improve it. We'll have to see, though. Fighter strafing with 5.3. While they didn't change anything, I feel like fighter strafing got just borked. It's broken. There's something wrong with it. Like, I've caught squadrons with a full strength fighter squadron, caught a squadron in it, strafed right through, killed only 2 planes out of 6. Did a second strafe, caught the same fighter in that box, killed only 2 more out of 4. So it was just like, what's going on here? What's going on with these fighter strafing things? And again, problem that was acknowledged. They said that they have heard this from other places around the world, that other CV players have pointed it out, and they'll look into it. So again, no ETA yet, but they are aware of it. High tier AA, actually AA in general was changed, where now long range AA is more deadly, and the short range AA not so much. And at the lower tiers, AA it's okay. Like I said before, the low to mid tiers, it all seems to be okay. Everything's kind of decently balanced there. Cleveland's are scary though. But the high tier AA, like the Des Moines, the Hindenburg, those are actually really scary. They will mess up your planes. Still, the high tier A in its present form on the live server isn't nearly as strong as it used to be. They have made the defensive AA fire consumable slightly less of a multiplier than it was when I first tested it. So again, while the high tier cruisers are terrifying and everything, they'll chew up your squadrons, it's not as bad because, again, as a CV, you can attack things that are weaker in a first. So maybe like there's the isolated battleship, go after it. Or how about those destroyers? As a US CV, that is now more of a priority target than ever before, because those dive bombers, if you hit a destroyer, you could mess that destroyer up. I mean, there was a battle I think a couple days ago where I was up against an enemy team, and I saw one of their Shimikazes out there by himself. Shimikaze at 17,000 HP. I did 13,000 damage to the guy with dive bombers, and that Shimikaze just did not have a good day after that. So as USCVs, yeah, the AA is now really strong. Yeah, if your planes get close to it, they'll get messed up. But if you play smart and you hunt the things that are weaker first, DDs or unprotected battleships and whatnot, and then wait until later on in the game when AA has been neutralized more by HE shells and a lot more ships have their gun mounts destroyed, then you can go in and do a heck of a lot more damage with your bombers. So a lot of it, I think, has to do with a change in playstyle. Overall, I think patch 5.3 was actually a decent patch. I'm also really glad that now I have direct contact with one of the Russian developers so that I can send feedback faster and also get information about what's going on that much sooner with regards to their thinking. So anyways, folks, if you got questions, leave them in the comment section below. Otherwise, take care, and I'll talk to all of you again soon.